Welcome to Roll Credits, where movie lovers get the trivia they didn't know they needed. This podcast was created with help from AI tools, so double-check any quotes before you drop trivia at your next movie night. Today, we're diving into The Boys. Did you know many of the show's wildest practical effects, including some of its most shocking scenes, were done using real prosthetics instead of CGI? And before we get into it, drop a comment and let us know what movie or show we should cover next, old or new.
Honestly, the practical effects alone make this such an insane topic to unpack.
Oh, totally. But I mean, just to set the stage for anyone listening, imagine you're walking down the street on a perfectly normal Tuesday, right?
Right. Just minding your own business.
Exactly. You're holding hands with the person you love, talking about dinner, whatever, and suddenly this blur just rips past you at, like, Mach 3.
The sheer kinetic shockwave of it.
Yes. It knocks the breath out of you. You open your eyes, and the person you were just talking to is, well, they're gone.
Reduced to a literal red mist hanging in the air.
Yeah, and you look down and realize all you're holding is, like, a pair of severed forearms.
It's just such a visceral, horrifying image.
It really is, and it totally shatters what we're culturally conditioned to expect from this genre, you know?
Absolutely, because for nearly a century, I mean, going all the way back to Action Comics #1 in, what, 1938?
Yeah, late 30s, right.
The superhero mythos has always been fundamentally clean.
Clean, pristine, very binary morality.
Exactly. You expect this demigod in a bright cape swooping out of the sky, catching a falling helicopter with one hand, and giving a charming little salute to the crowd.
And the buildings get a little dusty, but nobody actually gets hurt. The human cost is miraculously zero.
We want our saviors to be flawless. We desperately want those bold, thick lines between the good guys and the bad guys.
But then you step into the universe of Amazon Prime's The Boys, based on the comic by Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson, of course.
And that comforting mythology is just dragged through the mud.
Well, completely. That bright cape is stained with the blood of innocent bystanders.
And the hero who just saved the day. They aren't humble. They're checking their focus group polling numbers on a smartphone.
Yelling at their PR manager, threatening a witness. It's so murky and deeply cynical.
It really flips the entire narrative landscape on its head.
Which is exactly what we're looking at today. Yeah. We've got a massive stack of sources for this deep dive. Academic theses on the socio-political satire, behind-the-scenes VFX interviews, deep dives into the actor's psychology.
There is so much to unpack.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the world building is what makes the satire function so perfectly.
Oh, without a doubt. The creators haven't just written a story about bad guys who happen to have superpowers.
Right, it's bigger than that.
Way bigger. They've taken the defining god of modern pop culture, the superhero, and turned it into this funhouse mirror.
Reflecting the absolute worst of unchecked capitalism and celebrity worship.
Exactly. To really grasp it, you have to look at the infrastructure of this universe. In The Boys, superheroes, or Supes, as they call them.
They aren't altruistic volunteers.
Not at all. They are deeply broken, highly managed celebrities. And at the apex of this food chain is the Seven.
The world's premier superhero team.
Right. But here is the critical difference. They aren't managed by some righteous council or a government agency like S.H.I.E.L.D.
No, they are the exclusive intellectual property of Vought International.
Vought, which operates like a digital age Vatican.
But selling stock options instead of salvation. I mean, Vought is staggering. They're a pharmaceutical company, a defense contractor, and an entertainment monopoly all rolled into one.
This unholy mega corporation.
Yeah. And they sell the public this beautiful lie that these heroes were chosen by God or had miraculous genetic mutations.
When behind closed doors, Vought is the one who created them. By injecting infants with compound V,
which is such a dark underlying lie, it's the engine of the whole series.
Vought manages every single move these Supies make. Their scripts, their social media.
They ruthlessly cover up their crimes.
Exactly. Because the morality of a Supa is irrelevant to the Vought board of directors. A hero can be a sociopath, as long as their Q rating stays high.
As long as the demographic appeal is solid, they're protected. Because they're merchandised into theme parks and energy drinks and movies.
They are literally walking, flying profit margins.
Which brings us to our title characters, the Boys, the ultimate antithesis to the Seven.
A ragtag, blue-collar, incredibly angry group of non-superpowered humans.
Led by Billy Butcher. And their whole goal is just to rip the facade off Vought and execute the seven.
Which circles back to Huey Campbell, right? That visceral image we opened with.
Yeah, Huey watching his girlfriend Robin get obliterated by A-Train.
That trauma isn't just an inciting incident, it's the philosophical core of the show. It forces you to actually reckon with the physics of collateral damage.
Because standard Marvel or DC movies gloss over the casualties of a collapsing skyscraper. But this show focuses on it obsessively.
There's actually a specific detail from one of our sources about this, the ACDS.
Oh, the Association of Collateral Damage Survivors.
Yes, an emotional support group for everyday people whose lives were destroyed by careless superheroes.
That scene in the community center in season 1 is so grounded. It feels exactly like an AA meeting.
Complete with the folding chairs and the terrible coffee.
And Huey listens to this guy, Seth, share his story about an encounter with an ice-powered soup.
Right, which ends with him losing a very intimate piece of his anatomy to frostbite.
It's played for dark comedy, but the reality is chilling. These people are physically maimed by walking gods, and society actively victim blames them to protect Vought's stock price.
It highlights how terrifying it would be to live in a world where gods don't even notice the ants they step on.
But, Garth Ennis started the comic in 2006, right?
Yeah, over a decade before the show.
And his satire was focused on the comic book publishing industry back then.
Exactly, lampooning the static tropes and editorial mandates. But when showrunner Eric Kripke developed the TV series, the culture had shifted.
Comic books had devoured Hollywood.
So Kripke brilliantly pivoted the satire. The TV show isn't making fun of comic books, it's dissecting the modern cinematic universe era.
And the parody of the mega franchise is so sharp. Vought running a functioning movie studio to make Dawn of the Seven.
A surgical spoof of the real-world superhero movie machine. They even have that fictional director, Adam Burke.
The ultimate pretentious fanboy auteur.
Yeah.
And the in-universe trailer for the Burke cut.
With the slow-motion footage and the desaturated color palette.
And that dramatic choral soundtrack.
Yeah.
It is a direct, hilarious parody of the Snyder Cut.
But Vought uses those movies for historical revisionism. It's corporate propaganda.
Right. If a mission goes wrong and civilians die, Vought just rewrites it for the movie so the Supes look flawless.
It brainwashes the public into loving their oppressors.
I kept comparing the Supes to untouchable Hollywood child stars. Grown in a lab, handed to ruthless executives, surrounded by sycophants.
They have absolutely no framework for normal human empathy.
Completely controlled by handlers. Which makes me wonder, and I'm struggling with this based on the psychological profiles in our sources, does the show actually want us to pity them? Are Homelander and his team tragic victims of what?
That's the brilliance of Kripke's writing. It demands you hold two conflicting truths at once.
Okay, how so?
The show unequivocally condemns their actions. They are abusers, murderers, extreme narcissists, no apologies for their cruelty.
Right, they are monsters.
But the narrative meticulously traces that pathology back to the systemic rot of unchecked capitalism.
Ah, so capitalism is the true villain.
Exactly. The Supes are just the products. They are victims in the sense that their humanity was stolen at infancy to make them pliable intellectual property.
Because if a Supe's approval rating drops, Vought just discards them or kills them.
They are bespoke monsters, engineered to satisfy market demand.
Which opens up a fascinating logistical question. If you are a mega corporation managing bloodthirsty demigods, how do you sell that to a socially conscious public?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Vought does it by commodifying the social movements that would normally try to dismantle them.
The performative activism.
Exactly. We have an incredibly detailed academic thesis in our stack by Isabella Adams, titled Girls Do Get It Done, Neoliberal Feminist Critique in the Boys.
Okay, break down neoliberal feminism for us, because it sounds like a graduate school syllabus term.
Basically, it's a brand of feminism that strips away the collective struggle for structural change.
And focuses on what? Individual empowerment.
Yes, specifically tied to climbing the corporate ladder and market success. It argues that if a woman becomes a billionaire CEO, feminism has succeeded.
Completely ignoring that the underlying structures oppressing the working class are still there.
Right. It says we need more female drone pilots instead of questioning the war itself. It turns the movement into a marketable lifestyle brand.
Wow. And Vought is the master of that playbook, like the Girls Get It Done campaign in season 2.
A massive, slick marketing initiative. Lunchboxes, magazine covers, catchy slogans.
But internally, nothing changes. It's completely hollow.
And the most calculated example is how they handle Queen Maeve.
Oh, the cynical rebranding of her life is nauseating.
Maeve is bisexual and secretly dating a woman named Elena. When Vought finds out, they don't offer support. They see dollar signs.
They forcible out her to capture the LGBTQ plus demographic.
The Brave Maeve brand.
And they pitch her Brave May vegetarian pride bars because their analytics say millennials associate veganism with being queer.
It's so precise. And Planet Vought, their restaurant, they put a Brave Maeve rainbow veggie burger on the menu.
And at Vaughtland, they open Maeve's inclusive kingdom with woke wokes and intersexual tacos.
It's absurdly funny, but the critique of multinational corporations during Pride Month is razor sharp.
They even push a public narrative that she's strictly a lesbian rather than bisexual because it polls better with straight men.
They literally ask Elena to dress in more stereotypically masculine clothing for public appearances.
Treating a real human being as Vaught's lesbian Ken doll, the illusion of inclusion.
And the hypocrisy is so glaring when you look at Starlight.
Annie January. She comes from Iowa. She's genuinely idealistic.
She wants to save people,
Sure.
but the second she gets to Vought Tower, they tear down her identity.
Her original costume is modest, homemade. But the marketing writers, Seth and Evan.
Named after executive producers Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, by the way.
Right. They force her into this hypersexualized, revealing swimsuit costume.
And when she refuses, arguing it's degrading, the mask of corporate feminism completely drops.
They explicitly threaten to fire her and ruin her lifelong dream if she doesn't wear it.
It's the ultimate distillation of corporate hypocrisy, preaching empowerment publicly while forcing female employees into objectifying boxes.
But it's not just the young heroes being manipulated. You have to look at the executives, like Madeline Stillwell in season 1.
The embodiment of ruthless control. She presents as this glass ceiling shattering working mother.
But she maintains her power by managing Homelander through this highly toxic, weaponized, edible dynamic.
It is arguably the most unsettling element of the series. Homelander can level a city, but emotionally, he's a starved, petulant child.
And she knows it. She uses her own maternity as a leash. She literally pumps breast milk in her office while having strategic conversations with him.
She deliberately exploits his craving for maternal love to keep the most dangerous weapon on Earth dependent on her.
Isabella Adams's thesis points out a great visual metaphor for this. On Stillwell's desk, there's a plastic Homelander action figure inside a glass display box.
It's exactly how she views him, an isolated, packaged consumer product.
But as the thesis notes, glass is fragile. Her control is an illusion.
Which brings us to the broader political commentary. Kripke uses these characters to mirror real-world political extremes.
And just to be super clear to anyone listening right now, we are entirely impartial here.
Completely impartial.
We aren't taking political sides or endorsing these viewpoints. We're literally just reporting on the creator's political themes and analyzing the source material.
Exactly. And Kripke relentlessly roasts the performative wokeness of corporate America. But he also explicitly critiques right-wing extremism through Homelander.
Because when Homelander realizes he doesn't need Vaught's scripted PR, he pivots to speaking directly to this highly angry segment of the public.
He hosts these massive rallies mirroring modern political extremism. He encourages deep state conspiracy theories.
Echoing real-world QAnon rhetoric. And his followers blindly accept this authoritarian American imperialist hegemony. But looking at all of this, I keep bumping up against this massive meta-irony.
The Amazon connection.
Yes, The Boys is mocking massive corporate monopolies and inescapable mega-franchises, yet it's produced and distributed by Amazon.
One of the largest corporate monopolies in history.
They literally sell Homelander action figures on the same platform, streaming the critique of Homelander action figures. Does Vaught's strategy actually work on the public in the show, or do they just not care?
Within the universe, it works because the public wants to believe the lie. Confronting systemic rot is exhausting. They want the comfortable distraction of superhero movies.
But the cracks in the facade are visible if you look closely, which is what Billy Butcher and the boys do. They see the physical blood seeping under the doors.
Which brings us to the actual physical mechanics of how the show represents that blood on screen.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The transition from the sanitized PR image to the messy, gory reality of human bodies colliding with superpowers.
Visual effects supervisor Stephen Fleet operates under a very specific mandate. No matter how wild the moment is, it has to be rooted in tactile physical reality.
3 gallons of blood minimum, right?
That is his literal motto for the production.
In an era where everything relies on smooth, weightless CGI, The Boys stubbornly leans into practical in-camera effects.
Silicone, fake blood, massive physical props.
Let's break down some of these practical setups, starting with Season 2, Lucy the Whale.
Oh, the scale of this is mind-blowing.
The setup is insane. The boys are escaping on a speedboat. The Deep tries to stop them by beaching a giant sperm whale directly in their path.
And Billy Butcher just locks his jaw and rams the speedboat directly into the side of the whale.
Any other show would shoot that on a green screen. But Arv Graywall and his team built a massive physical whale on a real beach in Toronto.
A 56-foot-long, 3,500-pound practical prop.
Plywood frame, sculpted styrofoam, and soft foam covered in painted silicone for the skin.
But the craziest part is they built a hollow cavity inside the whale.
Because the actors have to climb out of the boat and stand inside the animal's guts.
Right, so when you watch them slipping around in the blood, they are standing inside a practical set. They had 5 puppeteers hiding inside the cavity.
Manually operating the internal organs with mechanical levers to make them twitch. And a prosthetic beating heart.
Everyone was drenched in cold, sticky, fake blood. Stephen Fleet noted that the sheer physical presence of that rotting set piece grounded the performances.
You can't fake the disgust of slipping on silicone intestines.
It pulls a visceral reaction. A tennis ball on a stick never could.
And they apply that same obsessive philosophy to other anatomical scenes, like Termite in the Season 3 premiere.
Termite can shrink down to a fraction of an inch, and he shrinks down to physically walk inside his partner's urethra.
Yep. And while inside, he accidentally sneezes, triggering his power, returning to full size, and explosively eviscerating his partner from the inside out.
One of the most jaw-dropping things ever broadcast.
And they actually built it practically. Amazon approved the budget to build a giant fleshy tunnel.
They filled it with mounds of white powder because the characters had been doing cocaine, so the actor could physically walk through and interact with the environment.
And for the explosion,
they made a hollow silicone cast of the actor's torso, packed the ribcage with silicone viscera, and gallons of dark fake blood.
So it just flops over and gravity pulls the guts out onto the bed. It's horrifyingly beautiful.
But the practical magic is in the intimate close-ups too, like the eye gouging scene in Season 3.
Oh, Homelander pressing his thumbs into Queen Maeve's eye. Had to look away.
The camera trickery is genius. They placed a metal safety plate over the actress's actual eye, then a highly detailed silicone prosthetic eyelid over the plate.
And the hidden bloodline under the silicone connected to a pump off camera.
Exactly. And the wardrobe department created a shortened glove for the stunt double playing Homelander, with the tip of the thumb missing.
So his actual thumb is curled safely in his palm. The camera just sees the blunt tip of the leather glove pressing against the silicone plate.
But because the glove is short, it tricks your brain's depth perception. When the blood pumps out, your brain screams that a finger is sinking 2 inches into a skull.
Flawless. And it's not just blood. The vomit pump.
Ah, yes. The mechanical, pressurized vomit pump used to spray Huey in the face.
They actually had to halt production and do multiple takes because the first spray was too neat.
It looked like a hose, so they had to clean Jack Quaid up, reset wardrobe, and swap the nozzle for a wider aperture to get a chaotic, disgusting splash pattern.
It totally reminds me of 1980s John Carpenter horror films, like The Thing. The tactile nature of stretched rubber and Caro syrup blood hits your lizard brain in a way CGI never does.
But the vital connection here is how that gore enhances the satire. It shatters the sanitized illusion of standard superhero movies where violence is weightless.
Right. If a superhuman collides with a regular person at Mach speed, it's a catastrophic mess.
The practical gore forces the audience to confront the ugly truth of unchecked power.
But the effects only work because the actors sell the trauma. What's fascinating here is how these actors embody these broken anti-heroes, starting with Carl Urban as Billy Butcher.
His approach is a masterclass. On the surface, Butcher is a foul-mouthed, violent monster, but Urban insists you cannot play the violence, you have to play the pain.
Because his entire crusade is driven by the loss of his wife, Becca. The rage is a shield for his grief.
And a huge part of that shield is his voice. Urban worked with Lord of the Rings dialect coach Andrew Jack to perfect that specific guttural Cockney accent.
Every time he smiles and says diabolical, you feel the immense weight behind it.
And that tough exterior slowly cracks through his relationship with Huey,
played by Jack Quaid, an incredibly twisted odd couple dynamic.
Butcher starts off exploiting Huey's grief over Robin to infiltrate Vought, but then we learn Butcher had a gentle younger brother named Lenny who died by suicide.
And Huey resembles Lenny, So Butcher subconsciously projects his dead brother onto Huey and gets desperate to protect his innocence.
But the absolute gravitational center of the show is Anthony Starr's Homelander.
Starr completely transformed physically. The synthetic blonde hair, the clean-shaven look, the rigid, perfect posture.
And his performance is built entirely on microexpressions. Because emotionally, Homelander is crippled by a desperate black hole-sized need for adoration.
You're constantly scanning the twitches in his jaw, waiting for him to snap. Some of his scariest moments are completely spontaneous.
Like the scene in season 4 where he confronts the elderly researchers who experimented on him as a child.
Oh, and the lab.
Yes. Starr breaks into this sudden, unprompted maniacal laugh. Eric Kripke said it was nowhere in the script, and it was the scariest thing he'd ever seen the character do.
The sound of a god losing his grip on sanity. And Starr actively pushed to include Homelander's milk fetish.
He recognized the psychological goldmine of the season 1 breast milk obsession and advocated for it as a recurring motif. Whenever he feels weak or humiliated, he obsessively drinks milk.
A visual shorthand for his infantile neediness. A weapon of mass destruction looking for a mother.
And we also have to talk about Aya Cash as Stormfront in season 2.
A massive departure from the comics, where Stormfront is a male Nazi character based on Thor.
They gender-swapped her and gave her a terrifyingly modern makeover. Costume designer Laura Jean Shannon styled her with a modern high-fade haircut.
But subtly hid literal eagles, styled after Third Reich iconography, in the metal hardware of her costume.
At first, she seems like a progressive feminist disruptor live-streaming her unfiltered thoughts.
Until you realize she's a nearly century-old Nazi party member. A chilling commentary on how modern fascism hides behind relatable, internet-savvy exteriors.
And speaking of how audiences perceive characters, there is a phenomenon with this show that is deeply baffling.
The fan edits of Homelander.
Yes! Anthony Starr is objectively playing a cruel, pathetic, mass-murdering monster. Yet thousands of people make Sigma male fan edits of him online.
Using him as an avatar for masculine dominance, does Starr's charisma accidentally override the satire for some viewers?
Eric Kripke has openly expressed absolute bafflement over this. He doesn't understand how anyone can watch Homelander slurping breast milk and murdering out of insecurity and think, yes, that's my guy.
The show is not subtle about its condemnation of his fascism.
But a small vocal minority projects their deep-seated desires onto him. They mistake his cruelty for strength, engaging only with the aesthetics of power and ignoring the subtext.
And to really test the limits of the audience in television broadcasting, they took all these broken characters and threw them into Season 3, Episode 6, Herogasm.
Which raises an important question about adapting pure shock value into an emotional television narrative.
In the comics, Herogasm was an annual Vought-sponsored superhero orgy on a Pacific island.
The public thought they were in space fighting aliens, but they were really just having drug-fueled debauchery.
But for the show, they scaled it down to a secluded mansion in Vermont, hosted by the TNT twins.
And making it that contained, claustrophobic environment actually dialed up the emotional stakes.
Because Kripke's golden rule is, it's not crazy just to be crazy.
Exactly. The shock value must advance character development. So while you have floating sex toys and ice-powered intimacy in the background.
And that cameo by Love Sausage.
Right. But the core of the episode isn't the orgy, it's the climactic confrontation between Homelander, Soldier Boy, and Butcher.
With Butcher and Huey injected with temporary Compound V, it is a savage, ugly fight.
Stunt coordinator John Koyama spent 5 grueling days shooting the choreography for that, smashing through walls while managing dozens of background extras simulating sex acts.
And Carl Urban shared that hilarious trivia about running out of fake sperm.
They depleted the entire special effects reserve.
They had to send production assistants to pharmacies to buy massive industrial amounts of personal lubricant. Urban joked about seeing a weary crew member walking past with handfuls of lube.
It perfectly highlights the surreal nature of the production. But underneath all that lube and destroyed drywall, the episode works on a profound emotional level.
Because the fight is really about 3 generations of toxic masculinity beating each other to death. Soldier Boy's repressed boomer anger, Homelander's narcissistic entitlement, and Butcher's nihilistic rage.
And Huey watching, realizing that absolute power is corrupting him.
If a show has practically no limits on what it can show, how do the writers decide when enough is enough?
The line is dictated by the emotional truth. The gore and sex are the seasoning, not the steak. If a shocking moment doesn't expose how broken the characters or the corporate structure are, it gets cut. The spectacle must serve the satire.
And that wraps our deep dive into The Boys. If you enjoyed exploring this chaotic world of superheroes gone wrong, follow roll credits and share it with your fellow fans. And don't forget to drop a comment with what movie or show we should cover next, old or new. We'll be back soon with more trivia, more movie magic, and maybe a few more jaw-dropping moments.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought. We've analyzed the fictional Vought International and the reality of corporatized heroes, but look at our real world today, dominated by highly curated social media personas and billionaire tech moguls. If superheroes actually existed today, would they really look like the noble saviors of the Marvel Universe? Or would they look exactly like the flawed, brand-managed narcissists of the